Good morning, you're watching HORNBILL TV's Morning Pulse. India's economic future is more closely aligned with Western economies than with emerging market blocs such as BRICS, according to Trin Nguyen, senior economist for emerging markets at Natixis. Her argument rests on the structure of trade, comparative advantage, and the basis for India's export growth. Speaking of the NI, Nguyen noted that India's strongest growth prospects lie in deeper economic engagement with the US and Europe, regions where India already runs large trade surpluses. I argue that it should grow where it can, but it should grow the fastest where there are the highest margins and more comparative advantage, and it lies in the West, she said.
Trin, thank you for speaking with ANI. I'll get right into it. With the string of deals that India has recently closed, which include the UK, New Zealand, EU, and now the US, can you break down what is the significance of the US deal and how it is driving a capital markets reaction that we did not see from prior Indian trade deals?
The US-India one is immediate. It is India's most important market. Obviously, that didn't do so well last year, but generally speaking, it's the most important market. The 50% tariff on it was pretty much a big burden for India in terms of export earnings. Obviously, as you know, many sectors are exempted, like tech, ICT, semiconductor, energy, so on and so forth. But the ones that really are important is labor-intensive sectors. And so for those sectors, there's a lot of employment, and that employment is quite important. And that was deeply affected. And it's affected in lack of orders from India, but also losing competitiveness. More importantly, the fact that other countries have had trade deals with the US to lower their tariffs to particularly Southeast Asia to 19-20% level, while India has this huge tariff, means that for investors, they're a bit concerned about the long-term picture of India, right? Unless you're only investing in India to serve the Indian market, you're concerned about your ability to access the US market. And that's also, there's big questions also about these other sectors that are currently exempted, including pharmaceutical, which India cares about. What is that going to be? And I think big question marks about the US-India relationship, whether or not it can draw, a floor to that deterioration. And I think the deal was important in that it releases a lot of that angst. And the relief is immediate. The relief is immediate versus, say, the EU FTA, in that it is a liberalization, but it has to wait until the EU side ratify. It has to wait, and everything is in a graduated manner. So even in textile, eventually it goes to 0% to even the level playing field with Bangladesh and Vietnam and so on and so forth. But that'll take like 7 years. So basically, if we're looking at medium-term projection versus for the US, the relief is immediate. It's within days, you're probably going to get tariffs going down to 18%. And I think for capital markets, it obviously liked it. It liked it for two reasons. One, for obvious reasons, which means you're probably going to get more export income, which means that on the current account, you'll get more income to help the rupee. So that's why the rupee was really happy. On the capital side, there was a lot of negative sentiment about India generally because, even though India growth was very strong, nominal GDP growth was very weak. It had the weakest performance in exports in the region, and that put a lot of pressure on the rupee in the time when the dollar is soft. And because earnings was soft and investors investing in India expect earnings to be really high, right? That's why you invest in a high growth economy. So I think that's why capital markets are really happy, because we're looking at a situation where sentiment is shifting, and it's shifting to be much more positive. So you'll get some capital flow, some portfolio. And on the FDI side, which is basically long-term investors deploying capital to India, they're starting to see stability in that market access to the biggest market is not blocked. Now, I think the second positive element to this, I would say, is that it's signaling a big turn for India. India traditionally, if you read the rhetoric, whether it's op-eds or policymakers, everyone tends to think it's such a big economy. Why should we look outward? We have services that are growing well. We underperform in merchandise trade. Not a big deal because there's plenty of demand within India itself, right? So it's a country that tends to look much more inward vis-a-vis, say, China or vis-a-vis many, many other economies, or particularly to Southeast Asian economies that tend to think we have to grow outward. And I think the shift, I would say after the UK FTA, the EU FTA is a really big one. And the US, China, US India deal.
The Securities and Exchange Board of India is intensifying its focus on the corporate bond market as a primary driver for capital formation and investment diversification. Speaking with reporters at the sidelines of the inaugural Pan-India Outreach Program for corporate bonds, SEBI Chairman Tuhin Kanta Pandey outlined a multi-pronged strategy to enhance the bond ecosystem, emphasizing improvements in primary issuances, secondary market liquidity, and investor awareness. The first thing is how to improve primary issuances, public issuances in bond. The second is how to improve secondary liquidity, and third is how to do more outreach so that the people understand. Pandey said. He noted that the corporate bond market has already shown significant growth, with the outstanding amount reaching Rs 58 lakh crore from Rs 17 lakh crore previously, reflecting a 12% CAGR. He highlighted that while corporate bonds were once 40% of bank credit to industries, they now account for 60%, signaling a shift in how Indian services and industries seek funding.
You're talking of bonds?
म्युनिसिपल बॉन्ड्स.
हाँ, म्युनिसिपल बॉन्ड्स में देखिए सबसे पहले तो उसमें एक अवेयरनेस का इशू रहा, क्योंकि म्युनिसिपल बॉन्ड मार्केट के लिए इशूअर्स जो हैं वो म्युनिसिपैलिटीज़ हैं और म्युनिसिपैलिटीज़ एक लोकल बॉडीज़ हैं और उनको बॉन्ड के बारे में और करने में समझने में भी टाइम लग रहा है. बट ये अब प्रोसेस इस स्थिति में पहुंचा है कि बहुत सारी म्युनिसिपैलिटीज़ आगे आई हैं. Many municipalities have come forward to issuing the bonds, and 12 such bonds have been issued. And there are many cities which have come out with the bonds. Secondly, there is a great deal of budget announcements are clearly indicating that the government support will be forthcoming for the municipalities who will be issuing the bonds. So therefore, this municipal bond market, I agree with you. At this moment, it is very, very nascent. Very nascent. It is next to negligible compared to what we need for urban infrastructure, but it has got a very big potential because once every state starts doing it, and we have doing outreach program with all states, when every state, some key municipalities start doing it, then there will be a greater, because they have now started understanding what the market is. Municipal financing, of course, municipal finances are very important because whenever you have a municipal bonds issued, the money will have to be retained in the escrow. So that is the SEBI safeguard we have built, because there cannot be any insolvency framework for municipalities. So therefore, what will happen to the investors if there is a default? So therefore, we have taken additional measures in terms of designing a structure where money funding is available through an escrow and this thing, and that will be the first charge on whatever the revenues they earn. So this necessitates that the municipalities which are issuing bonds, they have relatively stable finances. And because municipalities with unstable finances would not be able to certainly issue these municipal bonds because they will not pass muster with us. So I think this framework is now developing fast, and I would see municipal bond market developing in future for India.
So investor protection has been your key agenda, and आपने जो 90% को investors को जो FNO में नुकसान हो रहा था वो नंबर गिर गया है. तो ऐसे में बहुत से लोगों की अब ये मांग है कि क्या सेबी गार्ड रेल्स के साथ दोबारा से बैंक निफ्टी हो गया या दूसरे प्रोडक्ट्स हो गए, उनकी एक्सपायरी वीकली एक्सपायरी शुरू कर सकता है?
मैंने डेरिवेटिव्स पे बोल दिया है, तो अब मैं उससे ज्यादा कुछ नहीं बोलूँगा. एकता जी, आप बहुत अच्छा बोलती हैं और बहुत परसुएसिव हैं, लेकिन आई हैव सेड कि एक जब बात कह दी गई है तो उसमें से अभी कुछ घी निकलने वाला नहीं है. I think it will be the government of India is working for that, and I hope it is issued soon.
Market making framework.
Sir, anything on that corporate bond market making framework? Is it doing something currently announced after the April monsoon?
No, अभी जो आपने बोला था, this is what we are working on already, and budget announcement has been made. So we would work with the stakeholders, and one of the idea is that during the course of the day today, some ideas will also emerge how this framework will be put into place. There are two regulators in this area, like total returns swaps में the RBI, and total उसमें that RBI will have to work, and in other area market making framework the SEBI and RBI have to jointly work, because how.
Reacting to the union budget, Delhi Minister Manjinder Singh Sirsa said the budget aims to uplift and empower every section of society and will help in realizing the vision of a developed India. He highlighted a major focus on women's welfare, announcing that girls' hostels will be set up in every city with an allocation of Rs 10,000 crore. Sirsa also said skill training centers for women will be established to further strengthen self-reliance. An exchange of sharp words broke out between leader of the opposition Rahul Gandhi and Union Minister Ravneet Singh Bittu on Wednesday inside the parliament premises. The confrontation took place at Makardwar as Bittu was passing by protesting Congress MPs. Rahul Gandhi launched a scathing attack, calling Bittu a traitor, which immediately drew a strong response from the Union Minister. Responding to Rahul Gandhi's traitor remarks, Bittu accused the Congress leader of insulting the sentiments of Sikhs and Punjabis. Bittu alleged that the Gandhi family was responsible for the killing of thousands of Sikhs and Punjabis, referring specifically to the 1984 anti-Sikh riots and naming former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. I also come from that family. It is painful to hear Rajiv Gandhi's name being mentioned alongside Shaheed-e-Azam Beyant Singh, he said. Describing Rahul Gandhi's gesture of offering a handshake as arrogant, Bittu said the Congress leader behaved like an emperor. He added that he refused to shake hands, saying, "They are enemies of the nation. I will not shake hands with the Gandhi family, which is responsible for the killing of Sikhs."
पहले तो आप लोग सब उसी दीवार पे होते हैं, वही मेन एंट्री है। और मेरा तो पेपर ले करने थे रेलवे के, मैं ड्यूटी बाउंड था, तो 12 बजे, तो उस तरीके से मैं 11:30 बजे के करीब मैं पार्लियामेंट अपनी गाड़ी से उतर के अंदर जा रहा था। तो जब अंदर जा रहा था तो यही चीजें इन्होंने अंदर की, हाउस के अंदर, तो स्पीकर साहब ने बाहर किया। अब मैं ये सोच रहा हूं, जहां सलाह मशवरा कर रहा हूं भी इसके आगे कैसे क्या करना चाहिए, क्योंकि अंदर यही करके बाहर निकले और बाहर भी यही सड़क के गुंडे की तरह ये बिहेव करने लग गए। और खास तौर पे पगड़ी को, सिख को हमेशा ही जैसे ये टारगेट करते रहे हैं गांधी फैमिली, उसी तरीके से आज वो शब्द जो आपने, मैं तो कह नहीं सकता, जो शब्द आपने चैनल में आपने वीडियो में कैद किया है, और वो शब्द यार बाकी एमपी थे, किसी ने कुछ नहीं कहा। सारे एमपी बैठे थे जो निकाले बार, और सारे कुलीग हैं, हम रोज मिलते हैं, किसी ने कोई शब्द नहीं। और सीधा राहुल गांधी जो एलओपी हो, लीडर ऑफ ऑपोजिशन हो, और इतनी सीनियर हो, तो उस परिवार से आते हों, पर वो पता नहीं आज उनको क्या हुआ था, इतने क्या पर्सनल गुस्सा लेके मन में बैठे हैं। तो उन्होंने ये शब्द कह के और फिर कहा आप मेरे पास ही आओगे दोबारा।
हाँ, उन्होंने कहा कि आप वापस
उनके पास आओ, और हाथ आगे किया। अब उनको ये लग रहा था भी मैं अगर किसी के आगे हाथ आग करूंगा, बढ़ाऊंगा मनाने के लिए, तो किसी की क्या हिम्मत। गांधी फैमिली का मैं भाई परिवार का बेटा हूं। तो मैंने कहा भाई मेरी बात आप छोड़िए, आप क्या हैं, आप सबसे बड़े देश के गद्दार हैं और सिखों के कातिल हैं, और हजारों सिखों को आपने इस देश में, आपके गुंडों ने जैसे आप बिहेव कर रहे हैं, हर जगह उनको टायर डाल के मारा है। और सबसे पवित्र हमारे गुरुद्वारे, उनको तोड़ा है। दरबार साहब जहां पे गुरु ग्रंथ साहब जी खुद विराजमान, उनके इनकी अंगों में उन्होंने गोली मार। तो वही दूसरी चीज इनसे बर्दाश्त कभी होती नहीं। पर्सनली मेरे यही पार्टी के अंदर भी रहता था, जब लोग वर्कर नारा लगाते थे, जहां वो राजीव गांधी जी का शहीद का नारा लगाते थे, वो सरदार बेअंत सिंह जी को शहीद आजम का नारा लगाते थे। वो पंजाब में जो गड़बड़, जो टेररिज्म था, जो पंजाब में आग लगी सिखों के, गुस्सा आया भी केंद्र सरकार दुश्मन है, उस टाइम यही सत्ता में थे, तो उसका ही गुस्सा था पंजाबियों को, सिखों को भी। हमारे गुरुद्वारे भी ढह ढेरी कर दिया और हमारा कत्ल भी कर दिया सबका, और किसी को सजा भी नहीं। तो वो सरदार बेअंत सिंह जी ने आके शांत किया, पंजाब को दोबारा खुशहाल किया। ये तो चाहते थे उसी तरीके से सिख मरते रहें, लड़ते रहें, उन्होंने शांत किया, क्योंकि उस टाइम गांधी फैमिली सत्ता में नहीं थी, नरसिम्हा राव जी और केसरी जी का जमाना था। अगर ये होते तो कभी ये पंजाब में अमन शांति नहीं होने देते। लेकिन बिट्टू जी,
On the US-India trade deal, Dev Garg, Vice President of the Indian Rice Exporters Federation, has welcomed the development, calling it a positive moment for Indian exporters. Speaking on the impact of the agreement, Garg said that the tariff on Indian rice exports to the United States appears to have been reduced from 50% to 18%, a move he described as highly significant. He added that the reduction is especially important for India's rice sector, noting that Indian rice exports to the US currently form a substantial share of the market.
Time to smile for all Indian exporters. Finally, we have some good news. The tariff, as it appears, has been reduced from 50% to 18%. Though there is no official confirmation with respect to that penalty that was imposed on India on account of Russian oil purchases, but from the statements that are coming in from the US authorities, and considering the fact that Donald Trump in his press release had stated that India will now be buying oil from the US and Venezuelan oil, this clearly shows that 25% is also poised to go away. So today, as the matter stands, will be now tariffed at only 18% as against the existing 50% tariff that was levied on Indian goods. Now, this is quite significant for the India's rice sector, because today our exports to the US are quite substantial. India exported 391 million USD worth of goods last year financial year 24-25, weighing about 335,000 metric tons. This year, our exports have been 240,000 metric tons, around $233 million. One very surprising fact is that even that these tariffs of 50% were imposed in August 2025. Prior to this, our tariffs were at 10%, so there was a steep increase of 40%. But now, with the data that have come in post-August, that is for September, October and November, if we compare this with last year's exports, after imposition of 40% tariffs, our exports have actually gone up instead of going down. In the same period, in 2024, we exported 65,000 metric tons of rice to the US. But after this 50% increase in 2025, our exports actually went up to 75,000 metric tons. This is not surprising, because as India's dominance is growing throughout the world and the popularity of Indian cuisines like Basmati is growing, so is the demand for Indian rice. Today, India holds a unique and indispensable position in the global food supply chains, which is not easily replaceable and not easily replicable. So India's exports, though, have continued and will continue to grow to the US. One of the most favorable outcomes of this trade deal is that today India's major competitors like Thailand and Pakistan are subject to a 19% tariff, and we are at 18%. Though this 1% might not look significant, but it assumes significance on the face of the fact that India today has a record surplus production of 150 million metric tons. This gives Indian exporters the depth and the diversity to keep supplying to the world at good prices. Today, Pakistan and Thailand combined export around $1.2 billion worth of rice to the US, and our exports are around 400 million only. So there is a huge gap in the market. There is a huge scope to increase these exports. So the Indian Rice Exporters Federation is continuously monitoring the situation. And as we have earlier indicated as well, that earlier a 10-pound bag before this tariff situation was being sold for $13 per bag. And after the steep increase of 40%, that price went up till around $18 to $19 per bag. This clearly showed that all the tariff burden was borne by the US consumer, and as we have seen in case of other countries as well, that even though these tariffs have now come down, but the domestic prices in the US will not come down so easily. So this is a time for Indian exporters to cash in and for farmers to get the maximum price possible. Another important fact is that the US had threatened 25% tariff for all countries doing trade with.
And that was all for this hour's bulletin. For more news and updates, stay tuned to Hornbill TV. Goodbye.